Formula One is preparing to bring back the V8, and on paper, that should be a mistake. The 2026 hybrid should have more total system output than the old naturally aspirated engines ever had. More electric boost, more energy recovery, more combined horsepower. So why is the sport already looking beyond it? Because the fastest engine on a dyno is not always the fastest engine in a race. To find out which one actually wins, we need to separate three very different types of speed. Type 1. Peak power. The V8 era ran from 2006 to 2013. These were 2.4 litre naturally aspirated engines that revved to nearly 20,000 revolutions per minute before the FIA gradually capped them down to 18,000. They produced somewhere between 720 and 800 horsepower depending on the year and the manufacturer. From 2009 onwards, teams could also run KERS, adding about 80 horsepower for roughly 6 seconds per lap. Even with KERS, the combustion engine remained overwhelmingly responsible for the car's performance. Throttle response was immediate in feel, linear, and far easier to read than what came after. Now compare that to the 2026 power unit. The turbocharged 1.6 litre V6 combined with a dramatically upgraded MG UK produces a total output of around 1,000 horsepower. The internal combustion engine delivers about 400 kilowatts, the electric motor delivers 350 kilowatts. That's close to a 50-50 split in peak power terms, though peak split and actual race lap energy contribution are not the same thing. The 2026 car does not just make power, it negotiates power. How much electrical energy is available, when it deploys, when it harvests, all of that shapes what the driver gets at any given moment. On peak power alone, the 2026 hybrid wins convincingly. There's roughly a 200 to 250 horsepower gap, so the V8 loses the dyno test. Type 2. Lap time. You might expect that 200 extra horsepower automatically means faster lap times. It doesn't. Lap time depends on how power, downforce, weight, tyre behaviour and energy deployment all balance against each other, and the 2026 regulations change nearly all of those variables at once. The minimum weight dropped to 768 kilograms, though early paddock reports suggest several teams are still above that target. Downforce has been reduced by around 30% and drag cut by roughly 55% compared to the previous generation. Active aerodynamics allow the car to switch between a high downforce Z mode for corners and a low drag X mode for straights. In practice, the active aero also helps manage the trade-offs created by the power unit concept. Without X mode, reducing drag, the 2026 car would have a much harder time managing the energy deployment limits at the end of long straights. The lap time is not just driven through throttle and steering, it is also shaped by deployment maps, battery state, and the timing of when the car can afford to spend energy. The V8 car, by contrast, was mechanically simpler. The engine, the aero, and the tyres all worked without software managing which mode the car needed to be in. But that simplicity had its own problems. DRS gave us push-button overtakes that fans called artificial, and Pirelli's design to degrade tyres created performance swings that confused commentators, let alone casual viewers. The V8 era was not clean, it was just a different kind of messy. Was the V8 car faster over a single lap? Almost certainly not. The V8 probably loses the single lap test too, but here is where the easy anti-hybrid argument falls apart. The 2026 power unit is not bad engineering. It may be one of the most ambitious racing power units ever attempted. Its real achievement is not raw power, it's efficiency. Making a race car that recovers energy, deploys it strategically, runs on sustainable fuel, and still produces 1,000 horsepower is an engineering landmark. Kimi Antonelli has won the first 3 Grand Prix under these regulations. That matters because it proves the hybrid formula still has competitive potential. So this is not about one era being perfect and the other being broken. It's about which set of trade-offs produces better racing. A clever race car is not automatically a better race car. And that is where the V8 argument comes alive. Type 3. Racing speed. The strange thing about the 2026 car is that it may be faster and less raceable at the same time. Formula One isn't a time trial, it's a race, and this is where the 2026 formula has its biggest problem. The culprit is something called superclipping. The 2026 power unit harvests energy at full throttle on the straights, drawing power away from the drivetrain to recharge the battery. When harvesting kicks in, the electrical deployment fades and the car's acceleration profile changes at the exact point the driver expects the car to keep pulling. Oscar Piastri described the closing speeds between cars as huge and unpredictable. Before Miami, F1 adjusted the energy rules by reducing maximum permitted recharge from 8 megajoules to 7 and increasing peak superclip power from 250 kilowatts to 350. Trying to shorten the most extreme harvesting phases. It helped, but it did not remove the concern. The Behrman crash at Suzuka matters, not because it proves the 2026 rules are broken, but because it gave a visible example of the type of speed differential drivers had been warning about. When two cars are using energy differently, the closing speed can change so quickly that the driver behind has far less margin to react. Oliver Behrman closed on Franco Colapinto with a major difference in electrical deployment. The closing speed changed rapidly. Behrman moved offline, lost control and hit the barriers at around 190 miles per hour. The impact registered 50 G. Max Verstappen has called the 2026 cars Formula E on steroids and openly questioned whether he wants to keep racing under these rules. Lance Stroll said the regulations are destroying the sport. Some drivers have been more measured, but the volume of criticism across the grid has been impossible to ignore. The V8 demanded more from the driver physically, the hybrid demands more from the driver mentally, and that is the question drivers keep circling. Which version of difficulty feels more natural to fight? The V8's advantage was not that it produced more power, it was that the performance was legible. When a car gained, the viewer understood why. When a driver attacked the battle, made visual sense. The competition was between drivers and machines, not between energy states and deployment algorithms. That is the paradox of 2026. Formula One built a car that may be more advanced than anything before it, and then immediately had to ask whether advanced had become the same thing as better. The V8 return. What's actually coming? The V8 that's coming back is not the engine from 2013. FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem confirmed after the Miami Grand Prix that the new V8 will run on 100% sustainable fuels with minimal electrification. His target is 2030, with the FIA holding authority to force the change for 2031 without manufacturer approval. Sustainable fuel is what makes this politically possible. It gives manufacturers a way to support combustion without appearing disconnected from the sport's environmental direction. The fuel changed the politics, and the politics changed the engine, but the politics cut both ways. Audi, Ford and General Motors all committed to F1 around the 2026 regulatory cycle, with hybrid technology central to the direction of the sport. The FIA is now trying to simplify the future while keeping manufacturers who just invested in complexity. Not everyone sees that as a problem though. Toto Wolff floated a concept he described as a mega engine, roughly 800 horsepower from combustion plus around 400 of electrical assistance. If anything close to that materialises, the next generation V8 could produce approximately 1,200 horsepower in a simpler, lighter package. The verdict. So does the V8 lose the race? If faster means peak output, yes. If faster means single lap performance, probably yes again. The 2026 hybrid has the edge on both. But if faster means easier to race, easier to trust, and easier to use in traffic, then the V8 suddenly has a serious case. And that case has only grown louder through the opening races. The best version of the V8 hasn't been built yet. The path to it is politically complicated, and the manufacturers who just arrived have billions invested in the hybrid formula. But when it comes, running sustainable fuel in a lighter car with a simpler power unit, it won't be a step backward. Not because the past was faster, because the future might need to feel simpler, lighter, louder, and more human.